Welcome to part 7. I bet you're just as happy as me. At least you are not reading this and wanting to jump out your window. But anyways, back to the good stuff. If you have not seen any of the other parts of this video, you can go into the description to see them, or click the link that's in the video for this. Sharp Odds will now cost 45 MP instead of 40, with a 20% critical chance instead of 15% critical chance. It will give you a 30% maximum critical chance damage for 300 seconds instead of 40% critical damage for 300 seconds. I can't talk. Dragon's Breath will now do 210% damage instead of 100% damage. Frost Prey will now last for 220 seconds, dealing 330% damage instead of lasting for 200 seconds, dealing 500% damage. Blind will now cost 35 MP and last for 210 seconds instead of 180 seconds, with 40% chance to reduce the enemy's accuracy for 30 seconds for 30% for 15 seconds. Snipe will now cost 10 MP with a 5-second cooldown instead of 11 MP with a 4-second cooldown. Hero's will not change. Now to the Thieves. Nimble Body will now increase accuracy and avoidability by 16 instead of 20. Keen Eye's max level will now max out at 5 instead of 8, increasing the range of throwing stars by 200 as it did before. Disorder will now max out at level 10, taking away 10 MP as it did before, 10% defense, and minus 20 attack for 60 seconds. Dark Sight will now max out at level 10 instead of level 20. It will cost 5 MP to use, and you'll hide in the shadow for 200 seconds with 0 speed reduction. Double Stab will now have 130% damage with each stab instead of 140% damage with each stab. Lucky 7 will now cost 14 MP and have 170% damage with each star instead of 150% damage with each hit. Claw Mastery for Assassin will now be plus 50% mastery and 60 accuracy plus 200 stars per slot instead of 60% mastery and accuracy plus 20. Critical Throw will now have 50% chance of critical hit and a 15% minimum critical damage. Shadow Resistant, a new skill which will max out at level 20, will give you plus 10% maximum HP, 20% immunity to status, 20% resistance to all elements. Claw Booster will now only cost 11 MP instead of 10 HP and MP. Haste will not change in Big Bang. Drain will now max out at level 20. Costing 24 MP, dealing 240% damage instead of 160% damage, and 45% of damage absorbed as HP. Alchemist will now not change at all. Meso Up will not change at all as well. Oh, I'm sorry, it will. It'll still cost 60 MP for 120 seconds with 150% missile drop rate instead of 50% missile drop rate. Shadow Partner will now max out at level 20 instead of 30. It will cost 80 MP to summon a shadow that deals 180 damage. For 180 seconds, it deals 50% of damage you're dealing, instead of costing 55 MP with a normal attack of 80% damage, summon with a basic attack of 50% for 180 seconds. So you are not losing the extra 20% on your attack at first. Shadow Web will now have a 100% chance to catch each enemy for 8 seconds instead of an 80% chance. Shadow Mesa will now max out at level 20 using at least 340 and at maximum 800 Mesa, giving a chance of 30% chance to do 60% extra damage instead of a basic attack of 50% with 10% success rate. Avenger will now max out at level 20 instead of 30, still costing 30 MP, dealing 350% damage up to 6 enemies instead of 180% damage up to 6 enemies. Flash Jump will now cost 12 MP instead of 13 MP. Dark Flare, a new skill, will cost 100 MP, will summon a Dark Flare for 60 seconds and reflects 1300% of damage dealt. Cooldown is 60 seconds. Night Lord. Shadow Shifter will now have a 45% chance to avoid instead of a 40% chance to avoid. Venom will now have 40% chance of poison with 140% damage per second for 8 seconds instead of an attack of 60 with duration of 4 seconds, poison chance of 30%. We will be learning a new skill called Experience Star. It will max out at level 10, give you plus 25% damage to Lucky 7, Drain Avenger, and Shadow Mesa. 20% chance to regain a star upon using 1. Maple Warrior will now cost 70 MP instead of 60 MP. Taunt. It increases the enemy's defense, experience, and drop rate by 40% as it did before. Ninja Ambush will now cost 44 MP, dealing 200% damage instead of 100% damage, and will last for 14 seconds instead of 12 seconds. Shadow Claw will cost 46 MP and will be applied for 180 seconds instead of 25 MP for 120 seconds. Triple Throw will now cost 21 MP instead of 20, dealing 250% damage per star, ignores 15% of the enemy's defense instead of only damaging 150%. Ninja Storm will now cost 26 MP instead of 25. You'll deal 300% damage instead of 80% damage with a 100% chance to knock the enemy back by 300 distance instead of by knocking them back by 400. Hero's Will not change. For the bandits, the Dagger Mastery will be plus 50% mastery and 60 accuracy instead of 60% accuracy plus 20 accuracy. I really think you're getting tired of hearing that. I'm getting tired of reading it. Dagger Booster will now cost 11 MP instead of 10 HP and 10 MP, and it'll last for 200 seconds. And I'm getting tired of reading that too. Haste will stay the same. Steel will now max out at level 20, and it'll damage 300% instead of 130%, and will attack up to 4 enemies still. Savage Blow will cost 26 MP instead of 27 MP and attack 6 times with 90% damage instead of 6 times with 80% damage. Bandits will be learning a new skill called Shadow Resistant. It'll give you a plus 10% maximum HP, 20% immunity to status, and 20% resistance to all elements. A Chief Bandit will Shield Mastery will now be maxed out at level 10. It will increase the physical and magic defense by 100%. Chakra, whatever it is, will now max out at level 10 instead of 30, costing 140 MP instead of 27, with 300% recovery, 60% damage received if hit while using Kara. Assaulter will now max out at level 20 instead of level 30, costing 24 MP instead of 26, with 290% damage with 3 hits, 80% chance to stun for 4 seconds, instead of doing 500% damage. Pickpocket will now max out at level 10 instead of 20, still costing 50 MP with a 60% chance that missiles will fall off the enemy for 150 seconds, instead of falling off the enemy for 180 seconds. I will see you in the next part of this long journey, as I say.